A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you are not in the flesh. On the contrary, you are in the Spirit, if only the Spirit of God dwells in you. Whoever does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. But if Christ is in you, although the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is alive because of righteousness. If the Spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, the one who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also, through His Spirit dwelling in you. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
There is a story from the Jewish Talmud that goes along these lines. The body and the soul arrive before God to receive judgment, and the body quickly accuses the soul and says, "Punish him, not me. It's not my fault. After all, he makes me do it. I can't choose anything." The soul says, "Punish the body. Temptations, it's all there. You know that I'm not going to sin unless the body causes me to sin." Paul presents us with quite a mighty struggle here in Romans. Flesh versus spirit. If you are in the flesh, he says, you cannot please God. Only those in the Spirit. Lent, the whole season of Lent, we get this message of put to death the body, the flesh. Mortify yourselves. Subject the flesh to the Spirit. So on and so forth. We get this image of spiritual warfare. But like most wars, even victory here has a bad result. Death. This death, ultimately, is a failure. A failure for flesh and spirit to live in harmony. What it turns out to mean is that if our Lent is going to be a success, it must end in failure. Just look at the cross. Perfect failure. Jesus' Lent ended in failure. So, seemingly, the Spirit gets what it wants, death of the flesh. But this is a rather bittersweet end. Because spirit and flesh, though mortal enemies now, were once friends. In fact, they were once inseparable friends. We see it almost as if two childhood friends who were once bosom buddies, in a fit of anger against each other, wreck the lifetime friendship that they once had. But our faith tells us that it doesn't end in death. Our faith tells us it cannot end in death. At the center of our faith is belief in the resurrection. We need not look any further than Paul's words. He says, if the dead are not raised, neither is Christ. And if Christ is not raised, your faith is in vain. These two enemies, flesh and spirit, must be reconciled. This reconciliation of mortal enemies can only be brought about through the resurrection of our greatest failure, the resurrection of our bodies. It turns out that the truth of our resurrection rests on the reality of our failure. So have you failed this Lent? Maybe you failed at Lenten practices, your promises. Maybe you failed at school. Maybe you failed in personal relationships. Maybe you even think you are a failure. But it's in our failure that we turn ourselves over to the Spirit who dwells within us. The Holy Spirit. This Spirit, whom Paul says is the one who raised Christ from the dead. This is the one who has the power to reconcile mortal enemies, flesh and spirit. This is the one who will raise us on the last day. This is the one who can raise us even now from our failure.